There we go. Okay, great. So thanks everyone again. I really appreciate it. Again, apologize for the both my trip interference and now the rain. It's like God's conspiring against me. He must know how much I curse out the Yankees at times, that type of thing. So appreciate it. But it's a real pleasure to be with you today and be back with you to talk about data privacy and cybersecurity. Um, Lauren's introduction, boy, I hate my biography when what goes on the website versus what I actually do day to day. Just to give everybody a bit of a sense. So I really spend most of my time focused on cybersecurity, doing some incident response and counseling companies and associations on a wide variety of cybersecurity issues. And it's everything from sports teams, including the Mets, for example, as well as utilities, from water utilities to different trade associations and individual companies on cybersecurity, in addition to trying to train my own children who are 22, 20, and 17 on internet security, apparently failing on that, given by the number of canceled credit cards and debit cards we have in our house due to making suspect purchases. But it is definitely an issue that we all have to confront. We confront it here at my own firm as well. We always have to worry about cybersecurity issues, as I've mentioned in the past, and we'll talk about again. Attacks on lawyers are regular, fairly widespread, as a matter of fact, when we're talking about cyber attacks, stealing of private information, et cetera, just like it would be with any other entity. And so this is a critical issue. And I've, in fact, written a book. I think they call it a manual with the Practicing Law Institute out of New York on the ethical obligations of lawyers when it comes to cybersecurity. My standard joke in non-legal settings is, of course, you'd be surprised that we have ethical obligations as lawyers. For this group, you know it very well. But obviously, one of the most important things and why we're here as well is that um, the obligations for lawyers in particular do exist when it comes to cybersecurity and privacy, and it's something that needs to be taken seriously, in part again because we are not immune from attacks. Nobody says in their criminal activity, boy, we shouldn't attack them, they're lawyers. That would be the wrong thing to do. Cybercrime is nothing but doing the wrong thing nonstop, as well as some of our existing obligations, particularly when related to client confidentiality, Rule 1.6. For those of you who are familiar with that, that extends well into the cybersecurity realm as well. And the duty to maintain client confidentiality extends into making sure that systems are reasonably well protected. Doesn't mean, as you'll see, that a hack on a legal entity, on a lawyer, on a law firm, on a bar association, et cetera, is automatically malpractice or some sort of ethical violation. In fact, far from that, but we do have to have obligations to try and maintain the confidentiality of our folks. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a little bit of the continued environment and why this continues to be an incredibly important issue. I'll save some time towards the end towards specific questions. I know Lauren and I discussed that. We're happy to go over questions that you all might have related to cybersecurity and privacy obligations. But one of the things I wanted to start with is that, look, there is absolutely no slowing down when it comes to hacking. There's no slowdown whatsoever. Uh, the hacks continue to come in every way, shape, and form. The hackers are coming out and they are attacking us in any number of ways that you can think about. For instance, we recently had an attack on a company called Change Healthcare, where ransomware was inserted and it stopped medical record. It stopped the business of the company, but it also stole medical records as well. If you're like me and you have a prescription or any number of prescriptions at a pharmacy, you were impacted by this, for example, and it reminds me I need to call about this. You went and you were going to pick up your prescription, and if you have one of these coupons, like from one of these coupon sites, just GoodRx is the example I was thinking of, for example, or a manufacturer coupon, that coupon couldn't be processed. So something that, costs $200, if you were picking it up, but you were able to pay $10, $25, whatever the case might be, because of that coupon, that couldn't be processed. And I know when I went to CVS, I wanted an example to pick something up back in March and April, the line was out the door because everything was slowed down due to that cyber attack, and that was because of the tremendous amount of money that hackers were seeking to get out of Change Healthcare, and it was a really big deal. AT&T, which I am also a customer of, basically they had a situation where nearly all of their customers' call and text records were exposed in a massive breach. Hackers continue to attack in every way, shape, and form, which is why it's important for you all, for example, as New York City Bar Association members, to be careful about what you have on your phone, that you have additional protections as needed on your phone, so that if there is another breach of a telecom company like AT&T or Verizon or any of the others, you can protect your information. There's even been another ransomware attack that happened more recently that sadly once again affected me. We had to purchase a car recently, and the process of purchasing a car was even more painful than normal in this particular case, because the dealers were set back to pen and paper. God forbid we all go back to the late 80s and early 90s when it comes to anything. But that's exactly what happened. So a process that should have taken less than an hour because everything was agreed on beforehand took 3-4 hours in that particular case. It sounds inconvenient, but when you multiply that times any number, it's a significant issue, excuse me, for the businesses in that case, and as happened in that particular case, is costing these dealers a lot of money. And again, this is a great example of ransomware continues to pervade throughout industries. It even happens in the government side of things, where we see the Veterans Affairs and the State Departments were recently hacked by Russians through some flaws in Microsoft systems. So government agencies, government associated agencies, they continue to be top targets for cyber attacks. And so that's something you need to all think about, is that, in your world, you're associated, by being a bar association, you're associated with the courts, you're associated with, the legal system in general. Hackers, particularly on the government side, still love to break into these things. They can learn a lot. There's antitrust cases we saw with Google. What is that decision going to be? Can we get draft orders? Can we see some of the protected information that's being filed with courts? All that is absolutely something, the emails that are going back and forth, all that is absolutely something that the hackers will want to try and take advantage of and steal that information. And I picked this next example out too, in part because it was really fascinating to me, because it was something that really kind of flew under the radar, but really was very impactful, which is that, for instance, in Kansas, there was a cyber attack that disrupted the court system in Kansas. And, I have very good friends, law school friends, in fact, who live in Kansas and, teach in law schools out there. So I kind of keep a little bit of an eye for personal reasons out in Kansas, but I thought this was really fascinating. In that there was a 5-week disruption of the court systems, going back to manual filings, couriers, et cetera, because the cyber attack took down the court system and the filing systems in Kansas. And this isn't the first time we've seen something like that. It was, it's happened in other states where the filing systems have gone down. We've seen that happen with Pacer here in a federal level. And so we can see again in our world, the legal world, we are constantly under attack. And one of the reasons why Lauren and others have asked me to participate in this training and remind everyone that, we are targets. When you go after, a court system in Kansas, you may think, well, that's not such a big deal, especially since we're New York City Bar Association, right? I'll be a little bold and say there's more action going on in New York City from a legal perspective than Kansas. I think I'm reasonably safe in saying that, but it doesn't change the fact that it's evidence of how we see these attacks occurring all over, and no sector of the economy is immune. when it comes to these types of cyber attacks. And again, we've seen it in other court systems. We see it when governments, state and local governments are subject to cyber attack. I know there's been cyber attacks that took down a lot of the systems in Atlanta, for example, and that impacted their legal departments, as well as the airport, other filings, tax payments, et cetera, that type of thing. So it's an important issue, and it can impact our clients, particularly when we're talking about pro bono issues, right? If we're assisting individuals who are trying to deal with housing issues, payments of social benefits, subsidies, et cetera, or you're assisting clients who are just in need and are dealing with their local governments, like you would be in the New York City system. It shows that your information could be subject to attack from hackers at any given moment. And so it's something to be careful about as we're protecting the information, and realize that this could be a disruption that could impact the way we try and assist people through these various bar associations. And I mentioned as well that I mentioned this earlier, the CDK attack on the auto dealership. So again, just shows that these ransomware attacks are continuing unabated in every sector of the economy. It really is it's just remarkable how much is going on at any given moment. We've even seen sports teams being attacked through ransomware. Fortunately, some of the most critical utilities have not been attacked through cyber attacks, or at least successfully been victims of cyber attacks at this point. Ironically enough, can't go through a presentation on cybersecurity without talking about this, but ironically enough, probably the single most disruptive cyber event over the past month has actually been the incident involving the cybersecurity company CrowdStrike. And I'll say this in a very non-judgmental way, because I have a lot of friends at CrowdStrike. I think they do great work. Pillsbury does some work through CrowdStrike on behalf of CrowdStrike as their counsel song. And I say this in just a factual basis, but it's a really fascinating example of how sophisticated the situation is, and how difficult an environment that we operate in, and how there really are potential single points of failure that can cause significant problems that impact our everyday situation, and why it's so important that we pay attention to security updates, why we pay attention to security processes, and that why you have good management and testing, which Lauren and others do with regard to protecting New York City Bar Association systems. Because what really happened in the CrowdStrike situation was that it was, we'll let CrowdStrike and others argue about what exactly happened. Whose fault was it? Was it Microsoft? Was it CrowdStrike? Was it other companies, et cetera? Why wasn't the recovery fast, et cetera? But what I think is really relevant and important here is the underlying problem here was that there was a flaw. And when we talk about cyber vulnerabilities, when we talk about malware, what's happening is that malware exploits vulnerabilities in coding. And in the case of CrowdStrike, it was unintentional, obviously, but there was a problem in the coding that led all these computers to crash when there was an insertion of an update by CrowdStrike in that particular case. That could have been malicious. That easily could have been malicious. And when that happened, if that had been a malicious attack, that would have been, a perfect example of how vulnerable and complicated and interconnected our systems are, where all it takes is one little change in code and all of a sudden we can't fly on a given day. Our email goes down. The most impactful ones in my family were that Starbucks mobile ordering was down for several days. McDonald's systems were down for several days. Disney World, and I think in particular Disney Paris, there were no wait times being announced at the various rides because all of those systems were using a version of Windows that was crashed in that particular instance. Listen, in the Finch household, if you take out Starbucks mobile ordering and you can't tell me how long the line is for Big Thunder Mountain or Haunted Mansion, you literally, all bets are off. It's like the purge at that point in my household. So, and I wish I was joking, but I'm not necessarily joking in that particular case. But my kids were going on and on about how they couldn't order their their Venti SI fruit lemonade drink or whatever it is they get every day, which is a problem in and of itself that they order Starbucks every day. But that's for my therapy session, not for this session. But um, it just goes to show why cybersecurity is so important, because yes, email can be frozen, yes, money can be stolen, but really we can see a significant crippling of sectors of the economy, right? By virtue of malware that's injected. And again, it was an accident in the case of CrowdStrike, but really what happened there was it could have been a cyber attack in that particular case. And it was ironic because I was giving a speech out in Colorado for some utility general counsels about cyber attacks, and I had joining me the CEO and the creator of a cybersecurity company. He was flying Delta, and he was like me, a little bit late to the event because the Delta flights were all messed up as a result of the cyber attack. And so they were, we were very interested to hear his presentation. And this gentleman, by the way, is an honest to God cybersecurity professor at Stanford, so he knows what he's talking about, right? And he was saying, these problems are going to continue because our world is so complex at this point, right? There's so many systems that are interacted and piled on top of each other, and we've suffered from a long time of not doing a good job of integrating all these systems, and we're now seeing the real events of it. And it's going to take, in his estimation, decades, right? Decades, as he said, in order to really create a good, well interconnected series of computer electronic systems in order to significantly reduce the possibility of events like this occurring in the future. And so, I think when we look at the CrowdStrike situation, we shouldn't necessarily look at it as, oh, these companies are sloppy, et cetera. Yeah, that's going to happen all the time. I mean, how many things we purchase in our everyday life that aren't perfect, right? So, mea culpa, let's not throw stones. I would say in this particular case, that's really not the lesson more than anything. It's that it just goes to show why these attacks in part continue to be successful, which is that our infrastructure, our information technology infrastructure is so complex, so intertwined, and so human at the end of the day. I'm going to put it that way to try and be polite. It's so human because it's not without flaws. And the attackers realize that, and they can take advantage of it. And they can take advantage of it to make money. That's really what these people are doing at the end of the day. And they're actually, I wish I had included this, and to put a face to the situation. There was actually a really interesting article, I think it was in the New York Times in the last week or so, about one of these evil hackers that was working out of South Asia. And the story was basically this person was an indentured servant, effectively, working for a hacking group because he had to pay off some debt. And so he was forced to conduct cyber attacks. In this case, he was luring people to send money in that particular case. But he and hundreds of other people were working in one of these hacking farms, not because they were evil, but because there was a gang that basically forced them into this business because it was profitable to do so. And they could get someone who could work, ridiculous hours in order to pay off a debt. So it's a criminal enterprise at the end of the day that's taking advantage of where the money is. It's, the old adage, why'd you rob a bank? Well, that's where the money is. Why do cyber attacks occur? Because that's where the money is. And again, when it comes to our world, we continue to be targets, law firms and lawyers. Whether you're a solo practitioner, whether you work in public services and pro bono, or you work at a quote unquote white shoe law firm. Not even sure what white shoe means these days. I think if I showed up in white shoes, people would be questioning me or say, are those Air Jordan, something like that. But at some of the biggest law firms in the world, we continue to suffer cyber attacks all the time. And we've seen it because there's embarrassing information on behalf of clients that would go out for ransom purposes, being blackmailed. There's insider trading information. I've previously shown the slide, but talking about how a number of antitrust and corporate groups at big law firms have been attacked in order to get information. And people were making millions and millions of dollars. Hackers were making millions and millions of dollars by conducting cyber attacks and stealing information out of these law firms in order to conduct this information, stealing intellectual property. There's an example, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but that I've heard about, where a number of lawyers were working on a transaction for a company, and the company was going to be sold for billions of dollars. And they weren't seeing a lot of activity. They were seeing much less activity and potentially selling the company than they had expected. And then finally, when a bid came in, the bid was for much less than they had expected for the company. And the bidder said, "Well, we've been through your information, the publicly available information, and we think we'll just say $1 billion." And the accounting folks in the company said, "That's not right. We're worth more than that." And what they discovered is that after doing a pretty significant audit of the entity, that hackers had gone in to the accounting systems of the company and actually changed some basic financial information in the company to make it appear much less valuable than it actually was. In that particular case, it was actually worth $3 billion, let's say, instead of $1 billion. And it was only after a cybersecurity due diligence review were they able to realize that there had been this, massive change in the accounting system due to hackers who happened to also be based in the same country from the lowball bid. So they may or may not have been working in cahoots in that particular case, but we see this kind of information being changed all the time. And again, we've also seen firms that have been hit by ransomware in a world where we live by the billable 6-minute increment, where your email is down, you don't have access to systems. That's a big deal. When you lose access to your email systems and you can't do work, basically. Nobody's going to the library anymore to do research because we don't have libraries anymore. It's all done by LexisNexis and Westlaw, obviously. And we're not giving our documents handwritten with notes to the stenography pool because the stenography pool doesn't exist anymore. So these are all things, when that's taken down, it disrupts our ability to produce documents, to exchange correspondence and interact with opposing counsel or court systems, et cetera. It takes down our ability to make filings, et cetera. And so, these continue to be significant issues. And as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of my discussion, this is an obligation we all have as members of the bar. Those of us who are members of the bar, this is an issue for us once again, because of the rule 1.6, the duty to maintain confidentiality. It's something that's spreading across state bar associations. There's a wide scale recognition now that the duty to maintain confidentiality extends into the duty to protect your systems, to protect personal information, attorney-client privileged information, privileged discussions, et cetera, with opposing counsel, as the case may be, et cetera. And where we see ourselves and others being targets too is through what we've talked about before, which is business email compromise. And that's someone using email or other electronic communications to fraudulently induce transfers. It's really remarkable how much of that continues to go on these days. The victim numbers are in the billions of dollars at this point. It's that large, and I think that's probably the double-digit billions of dollars. Excuse me, where we're seeing this type of losses associated with it. And I think some of us have had relatives. Again, I had a daughter, candidly, I mentioned this earlier, where she got an email saying, "Oh, let's do one of these reviews online for Amazon or some other entity, and we'll pay you $10 to do a review, etc." And she did that and handed out her banking information in order to get the payment, to make the payment into her account. And then within literally 12 hours, she got a notice from the bank saying that her account was overdrawn by $5,000. And it was like, whoa, wait a second. She doesn't have $5,000 in her account to begin with, and she's not doing that type of transactions. And so I don't know how they got away with this. We're still trying to figure it out, but these hackers were able to, use her compromised debit card account to go ahead and insert, make a lot fake electronic deposits into her account, and then actually withdraw those funds in small and like $100 increments, that type of thing, until it was about $4,000 or $5,000 that had been stolen allegedly out of her account. Now, thankfully, the bank in that particular case was able to reverse all those transactions, and thus we didn't actually owe anything at the end of the day, when it came to that particular scam. But nevertheless, it just shows how fast and how agile these bad actors are, and how they can do all these sort of creative things. I mean, if you're like me and you do electronic deposits, I was shocked because whenever I make a check deposit online, you get $100 check from Nana for someone's birthday, that type of thing. The funds usually aren't available until the next day. And there's a size limitation on that, but somehow these cyber criminals were able to avoid that or go around that, and able to conduct the fake deposit and then the actual withdrawal. They're just so good at that. And whether they're pretending to be, hey, we'll pay you to do a review, we're pretending to be the boss, we're pretending to be someone from accounting, all of that, you have to be very careful in those types of communications, and make sure that you're validating exactly, who this person is, and that it's a legitimate source of communication. You need to verify it in order to reduce the chances of these types of business email compromise. And I think I've shared this example before, so I'm sorry if I'm boring anyone, but we had an example where a dear family friend of ours in New York, they had one of these situations, but it was even worse than your normal business email compromise. A hacker was able to get into their email systems, and they were able to pretend to be officials from this family business, and they communicated with their local bank in upstate New York, and were able to get a multi-million-dollar COVID relief loan, one of these federally funded loans, and send it to a bank account, all because they were able to switch the email, make it convincingly sound like they were the CFO of this family business. And it was only discovered because the CFO picked up the phone one day and called the bank and said, "Hey, we really had a great experience with that first COVID loan. We want to apply for the second one now that we know it's available." And the bank representative said, "What are you talking about? We just funded you for that second loan." And then they went in and they discovered all the emails from this bank were being redirected to the hackers. And so the bank thought that they were communicating with the CFO. They were actually communicating with the hackers, and the CFO didn't know anything was amiss, because the hacker was basically filtering emails to make sure that anything referencing the loan was going to the hacker versus the family CFO. Again, fortunately, everything was recovered in that particular case, but it just shows you how sophisticated these people are. And again, you need to be very careful, and this is why the Bar Association, we've worked with them on their policies and procedures, why we're so careful about how email works, where email is being delivered to, what types of protections are in place, the secondary authentication, multi-factor authentication is being used for email, because these scams are so prevalent. And again, this is the outline of how bad, of how these things are done, where they mimic an executive, and finance department wires the funds, and criminal receives funds. I think the important bullet point here, which I want everybody to remember, and I think it's really important, is that there's no form of communication at this point that is not subject to these business email compromises, right? You should always be suspicious, candidly, when you receive a text saying, "Hey, we need you to do this financial transaction activity. Click on this link, or go to your account and double check on this." Hackers are now able to take advantage of text. It's called smishing, so short messaging system phishing. But it also comes through Teams, it comes through Zoom, and it comes through other messaging tools. Some of you may recall a few years ago, it was about 3 years ago now, there was the attack on what's known as Colonial Pipeline, which is the gasoline oil pipeline system on the East Coast. Temporarily caused a spike in gas prices, which is pretty bad, and it was a ransomware event. what's really fascinating is that that ransomware attack actually came in through Teams. It didn't come in through email. So hackers know to exploit these collaborative tools. And in the post-pandemic world, where we're all using different forms of collaborative tools in order to communicate with each other, we have to be careful in every single messaging system that we utilize at this point. It's absolutely critical that you think about that and have the same level of healthy skepticism, whether you're talking to somebody by email, whether you're talking to them by text, whether you're talking to them by Zoom, any other method. Criminals know how to use all of these systems. And so it's not just going to be, the email from Brian Finch asking for a wire to a client or a reimbursement. It's going to be through any number of these collaborative tools at this point. And the victims are, of course, in every sector of the economy. The problems can be, seeing people in tech, construction, government contracting, energy, sports, leisure activities. We've seen it in housing. We had a situation where we got a panic phone call from an employee at a client that was purchasing a house, and their funds were for the purchase of the home were subject to a phishing scam, and so this person was out $1 million effectively from the house purchase because the hackers got into to the loan company and to the escrow agent, was able to redirect the funds. And we can't all be Rockefellers in this case, but $1 million loss in our home would be absolutely devastating. A $10,000 loss for a lot of people would be absolutely devastating anytime you're talking about transactions like that. And so fortunately, we were able to work with folks. The Secret Service was terrific in that case in helping us out, and they were able to get the funds back, thankfully. So, but it is particularly rampant in the housing industry, and so to the extent any of you, I know in the pro bono world, particularly low income housing or issues with landlord tenant issues, et cetera, the amount of money that is going through those systems is obviously staggering. And cyber criminals know that, and they attack those industries and they try and move that money around on a regular basis. So again, consistent with policies and procedures for the Bar Association, you want to be extremely careful and make sure if you're communicating with folks wherever there's going to be a transfer of funds, that you make sure you're dealing with the right people and that it's valid. And if you need to make a phone call in order to ensure that the email address, the routing numbers are accurate and they haven't been compromised in any way, absolutely do so. It's really, I'm not saying
Brian,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry, I just wanted to jump in there. Sometimes people say they feel silly or foolish making that phone call. It's not silly in 2024 to call someone and say, I got a weird email. I wanted to make sure that it's you. That's okay. That's the norm now. And you shouldn't feel silly. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. It absolutely is. I mean, it's shocking the number of people who fall for this. And I'd say this, by the way, I know I'm going to fall for it at any given point. I try to be as good as possible about these things, and knock on wood, I haven't really fallen for a couple things through the years, but was able to quickly sort of like realize that it was not right. So let me add this. I'm not preaching perfection in any way, shape, or form, right? You just you can't expect to be perfect when it comes to cyber attacks. I like to say, look, the U.S. government and these agencies, these big bad agencies like the National Security Agency, the Defense Department, the FBI, et cetera, they've all adopted as an official strategy the same thing that the New York City Bar Association has accepted, which is called zero trust, but it's based on a philosophy that the hackers are going to win some of the time. They really are. And so I live in that world too. And I assume the hackers are going to get to me, whether in my personal or professional life at some point. And so part of my philosophy and operating procedure is, whether you make that phone call, even if it's just right after you make that transaction and you say, you know what, this doesn't seem right. I'm going to call the person who was supposed to get that payment and make sure that they got it. Let's verify it, because something feels weird versus saying, oh no, I didn't make that phone call beforehand. did I make a mistake? What should I do now? Sort of the I'm a child of the 80s. I think of The Simpsons where, someone falls and, oh no, it looks like he really got hurt. Let's get out of here. We all get on our bicycles right away kind of thing. No, we own up to the problem. Let's call mom, let's call an adult, or let's call and make sure that transaction actually went through. We need to do that. And I've done that. And where it's been an error, the faster you act, the more likely it is that you can recover from that. And Lauren was good enough to send me this example of a phishing email that was sent and received by folks at the New York City Bar Association that was caught and was able to, people were able to see, oh my gosh, this was actually a phishing email, and it was what, the email address in this particular case was off a little bit. And my eyes are going. I just turned 50. And I've had bifocals for a number of years. And even though I have bifocals, it'll catch me doing this all the time. You might not be able to see that, but I take off my glasses and have to look very carefully. But, it may be hard to see it, but you got to be very careful, even with all the filters that are in place with respect to checking out emails, looking for phrasing of emails that's a little bit off or just being unexpected as well. All that is absolutely critical. Go ahead.
Ryan, can you zoom in on that email? Because I think the
let
red
me
arrow is helpful to indicate how
see.
subtle this can
There's-
be.
Yeah, let me see if I
The
can.
email address
Oops.
is not, you might think it's from the state bar, but the email address is at member-nisba.org.
Oops.
And
Okay,
the state bar's email addresses usually end in at nisba.org.
I'm just
So
gonna
in
mess.
the heat of the moment, you might think, it kind of looks good. Member NISBA, you really got to pop open that email address and see where it's coming from.
So, did I make it larger? I think I
Yeah,
did.
thank you.
Okay, good. Yay, victory for my technology skills today. Appreciate it. So the hurricane can't get me in every single way. So, okay, great. So I'm just gonna do that and then go back. Let's see, we'll go back down here. Excuse me. One thing I want to mention too is uh, what we've been talking about and being very careful. It's being made worse by artificial intelligence. Uh, Artificial intelligence, we have all sorts of discussions here about artificial intelligence, and we could do 2 hours on AI and its impact on your world. Like everything else, artificial intelligence has really infiltrated the world of cyber hackers and cyber criminals, et cetera. And what's the first thing that they have done? Is that they have used it to increase the quantity and quality of these phishing email scams. It used to be before that you could usually spot a pretty significant an email from a scammer because it was so poorly written. And the old Nigerian prince scam, and you knew it was not going to be true. Actually, I was, just as an aside, I was listening to a podcast the other day with one of my favorite comedians, Nick Kroll. His brother Jeremy is a very good friend of mine, and I know a good friend of a lot of charitable associations in New York. And actually, they were saying they wanted to create a comedy movie where someone falls from their Nigerian scam, and it actually turns out to be true in this case. And Tracy Morgan was playing the Nigerian prince. I thought that would have been a funny movie, but it's still there's AI is increasing the sharpness of these emails, and we have one particular client where they were telling us that they've seen almost like a 2,000% increase just in 2024 alone in the number of AI powered highly effective phishing emails. And by that I mean they're using ChatGPT or whatever the case may be to generate these emails and make them look really darn good. So much so that they're virtually indistinguishable just from a grammar and a cadence perspective from an email written by a human. So it's not the really awkward phrasing that is the tip off. Now, as Lauren was just talking about, you've got to look at the email address and you've got to think about it in context, meaning that why would I be getting an email from Lauren asking for $300 in iTunes gift cards right away because a New York someone we deal with at New York City New York City Bar Association, excuse me, needs that. No one's going to need that, so it's suspicious, right? You need to really, again, make that phone call. Don't feel uncomfortable about it. Question the context of the email. And it's even going in the world now of deep fakes. And we've heard about deep fakes, we've talked about cheap fakes, all these sorts of things. Um, with regard to how they can change our world, and media looks fake. It looks like someone is doing acts or saying acts when they're not actually doing so. And this is a scam, particularly from some of our more vulnerable populations, from lower income, who may not, well, I'm not going to say lower income. I'm going to say people who aren't as technologically sophisticated. And I would, for example, sometimes put me in that category. You know, elderly parents, elderly members of the community who aren't as technologically sophisticated. And again, I put myself in that category. If someone changes the home screen on my phone, I start yelling, I don't know how to fix that, that type of thing. I'm not on TikTok or Instagram and don't understand how to do it, all that sort of stuff. But people who really don't know how media works, and they just trust that they're getting a phone call, or that a video is been sent saying that, we need your help. We need you to wire this money, or mom and dad were telling you our bank account has changed, etc. Or, granddaughter is in Europe and she's been kidnapped and she needs $2,000 for a plane ticket home, lost her passport. That happens. There was a whole 60-minute story 2 years ago about how the elderly were increasingly falling for this. We've seen stories about how, for instance, Tom Hanks had to go on social media and say, hey, I'm not endorsing this product, because there was a video going around that was very realistic of him endorsing some random product, but it was not the case. And so again, it's hard to spot these things, and we're going to make mistakes going forward, candidly, but we all need to be careful. And again, we need to put these things in context and say, would I really be receiving this email? Would Lauren really be in Costa Rica asking me to transfer $15,000 into this IOLTA account? That type of thing. We've got to be careful about that, all of that. And we need to ask questions, double check with a coworker, check with a supervisor, send Lauren a text at a number that works, et cetera. Send Brian Finch a text. I'm here to serve the bar in a pro bono capacity, so I'm always happy to answer questions about these things. As long as the bar's okay with it, happy to weigh in on these things. And just think it through. And it's difficult in a world where we want to get things done on a regular basis and as quickly as possible, but we've got to be careful about that. And that leads to some reminders that Lauren wanted me to pass along. And that, again, if there's if there's an email that comes in with an external header, be mindful of that, especially if the email is supposed to be coming from a New York City bar org address, but there's an external email. That is a huge red flag, that there's something going wrong, or potentially going wrong. And if you become aware of a possible data breach, please reach out to Lauren or Tom or Cameron as soon as possible. Again, I can't, look, I'm as embarrassed as anybody. I'm the one who, I'll delete quickly as soon as I can if I see something like, oh no, I think I clicked on the wrong thing, right? I think I clicked on the wrong website, or when some blue screen of death showed up, etc. Or I get a suspicious email. It's personally, I'll be honest, it's kind of embarrassing for me as the head of the cybersecurity practice. I sit on our technology cybersecurity subcommittee, so I'm the one who gets emails about all the potential problems that have come up within the firm where somebody does something. If I've done something wrong, it's embarrassing to me personally, and my own, Jewish upstate New York anxiety growing into, overdrive kind of thing, with regard to, oh my gosh, I'm wrong for everything. My mom was right. I always do things wrong, all that sort of stuff. Sorry, not turning this into therapy again, but, it's embarrassing to send those emails, but you got to do it. And so I always notify our help desk and our chief information officer, and they will work as fast as they can to remedy it. You just believe me, it's not the crime, it's the cover up. It's true for phishing and for cyber attacks. You've got to respond as quickly as possible. There's no shame in doing it. If you own up to it, everything will turn out okay at the end of the day, and will turn out the way it's meant to turn out. So just trust me, as someone who has a lot on his shoulders and is responsible for a lot of this and is asked to present all the time, I will tell you, I make the mistakes, and fessing up to them as quickly as possible and reporting it is the best thing you can do. It absolutely is. And so, consistent with that, please review the City Bar's data privacy and security policy. Lauren and Cameron can point out where it is in the intranet, and any contracts should always be sent to Lauren and Cameron to review that they contain adequate security and privacy language. That is so critical. I'm glad we kept that point in there, Lauren. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but a lot of my time now is spent just reviewing these contracts and making sure that there is adequate language in there regarding who's responsible for what. Who has the obligation? Is the bar association? Is it the vendor? We're seeing it now, going back to CrowdStrike. Delta Airlines, as I mentioned, they said, we're going to sue CrowdStrike for upwards of $500 million. And CrowdStrike came back and said, oh, sorry about that. We have a contractual limitation of a couple $1 million, that type of thing, and, those contract language matters. It really does. I guess that's why there's 2 semesters of it in the first year of law school. Didn't understand it then. I guess I get it now after 25 years. So,
Brian, I just wanted to jump in with a couple of things. We have a couple of questions in the chat. There's a bullet in this slide that talks about the upcoming version of the employee handbook. I think that might be a little out of date because we do have a new acceptable use policy, which we'd sent around. The biggest change is that City Bar work should be done on City Bar issued devices, with a couple of limited exceptions. If you're using a phone, you've got the Outlook app and you're opening an email on the go. But for the vast majority of your work, City Bar devices. That's a huge part of our cybersecurity program. We don't really allow personal devices other than, checking your email from your phone, opening a PDF, that kind of thing. But do not store City Bar data on your personal devices. And then we have 2 questions, and one's from William, who is asking about referring callers. We get, as you know, Brian, we get callers into our legal referral service and a lot of inquiries from members of the public. Are there organizations or nonprofits where we can refer people who have questions about cybersecurity? And I don't want to put you on the spot, so maybe we can put together some resources and share that with everyone too, if we do get inquiries about, cybersecurity issues.
Absolutely.
And we're not able to answer them or make a referral. So maybe we can follow up on that one.
Please do.
And then I think Maria had a question, Donahue had a question in the chat about what to do if you feel a personal bank account may have been compromised. Is it okay to tell the bank that? And then you try to close the account and open a new one, or is the bank going to hesitate because it thinks that you as the customer are trying to perpetrate a fraud? Nobody trusts anybody. So what's the best line there if you think your bank account has been compromised? I don't know if this is a little...
No, again, I mentioned it earlier with my daughter, Jane. God bless Jane. She's the baby. We love her. But man, she makes some bad decisions sometimes. So, go to the bank right away. I will tell you the name. In my case, it was PNC Bank. They were terrific. They were absolutely terrific. The first thing you can do is go online and dispute the transactions. And if you don't know how to do that, call the 1-800 number on the back of your debit card. Call your local branch. If you have a local branch that you can go to, just call them and tell them that you think this is suspicious right away. They have a whole investigation process that's in place. And what happened in the case of the PNC accounts was that they put a temporary hold and a credit to your account. And so you basically, like it was $100, Venmo or PayPal withdrawal from this account. They went in and they credited that, and they gave it a temporary credit. So that money came back into your account. And then they will do their investigation and then make their final ruling. And so that gives everybody time to investigate and make sure that the dispute is legitimate. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to the bank. And I would add that if you feel like the bank is not being fair with you, then there are situations. If someone came to you as through a pro bono system and says, I feel like I'm being treated unfairly by the bank, providing pro bono assistance or reaching out to consumer protection advocate in the New York State Attorney General's office, you can work with them and they will step in that case as well. So yeah, and you can then change accounting numbers, account numbers, et cetera, in order to make things safer. It's a bit of a pain because then you've got to restart all of your automatic accounts, et cetera, that type of thing. But I would say go immediately to the bank. That's just the right thing to do.
And I know we're up against, actually, we're a little over time. So if anyone has other questions, now would be the time while we've got Brian here. Or you can
and
always
send
me an email. I can send it along. It doesn't have to be right now.
I was a few minutes late, so if anybody, I can stand for a few minutes. I know people are heading into lunchtime as well, but if there's additional questions, I'm happy to answer them, or please feel free to shoot me an email, or send me voicemail, or just drop me a call. It can go to my cell phone, et cetera, but that's my email. I'm happy to talk to anybody. It's a real privilege to work with Lauren and the bars, and I sincerely mean that. It's a privilege to work with you all, and so I want to be as helpful as possible. I love helping folks out all the time. I was on a trip recently, and someone was dealing with someone who claimed to be a U.S. Marshal, saying that they were going to be arrested for missing jury duty at a federal court, and they needed to go to Walmart and get X amount of credit of gift cards to pay the fine. And I almost was like, are you serious that you believe this? But I kept believing it and was calling the marshal's office, but I sat there and I walked him through the whole thing. So it happens to everybody, and it was obviously a fraud. And it so happened that a former partner of mine, he's the U.S. attorney in this particular district. And I mentioned it to him. He's like, my God, you wouldn't believe how many of these stupid things we get where people are pretending to be marshals, saying that they're missing jury duty. So it happens all the time. But odds are we've seen it or we know enough to how to deal with it. And so I'm happy to, whether through Lauren or me directly, be of assistance in any way, shape, or form.